other thing that Gateway does is it's in orbit around the moon, and we can do missions around the moon, astrophysics in nature. So we can see on the far side of the moon, it's extremely quiet from an electromagnetic spectrum perspective. So in that very quiet environment on the far side of the moon, we can not just see back to the first light in the universe, we can see back to the dark ages, after the Big Bang and before the first light. And we can actually see that on the far side of the moon in a way we can't see anywhere else. At least near us. So we can create astrophysics missions that are lunar orbiters, and then use the Gateway as basically a bent pipe communication node, so that we don't have to have massive dishes and massive hardware that we have to launch to the moon. So we can have many more astrophysics missions to see deeper into space, further back in time, as a matter of fact, and use the Gateway as a tool for communications, so that we can, instead of a $500 million mission, we can do a $90 million mission. Then we can do a lot more missions. And it's astrophysics, it's heliophysics, the study of the sun, it's the study of deep space, but it's also space weather. And when we send astronauts to Mars, which I know we're all interested in, when we send astronauts to Mars, we have to get really smart on space weather. The radiation of deep space that comes from the sun and outside our own solar system, and we can study that from the moon in a way we can't do on the International Space Station, because you're under the magnetosphere of the Earth.
So this is Jim Bridenstine talking to the Everyday Astronaut, which is just one of the many different social media outlets that they use, like SciShow News and SciShow Space and PBS Space Time and all of the various companies like Space.com that promote all of the science that they're presenting, and they do it in a format in which me and you can, understand it. We'll give them 5 minutes of time and understand what they're trying to describe to us. Now, right here, it's very simple what he's saying, having to do with the International Space Station's disassembly in 2024 and the fact that we will be needing a new one. There is no one going to the moon. It is all, if you just took away him saying moon and said thermosphere instead, everything that they're saying would be on par with what every other nation in the world is doing. Why no one else talks about landing on the moon, why the only places that were working with us with our moon landing endeavors, such as if you look at the new moon landing rover from India or any of the Jerusalem ones, you'll notice that it's exactly what he's talking about here at the exact time that they were coming out with second stage 5G communication satellites. Now, I talked about this on my wall, on my channel several times, that these are just second stage communication satellites. There is not actually anything heading towards the moon. These are military thermosats. Some of them might be exosats, the exosphere, the thermosphere. And so, but none of them are actually even within the plasmasphere or within the magnetospheric bands. None of them are going to the moon. We can't. There's plenty of science that shows why. Check out GSI or Princeton or Berkeley or UCLA or any of the prestigious universities that explain to NASA after they've asked why Russia stopped there, why we're getting sick, what we can do about it. So this is him stating very clearly that as in 2024 comes closer and closer, we need to recapture the the Apollo mission with Orion, so that we can try to make our own lunar space station, which Apollo 17 said that the Mir, or Skylab, or the International Space Station, were also supposed to be exactly where he's saying this one will be. Whatever they say it's going to be around the moon, it's built in the lower thermosphere between 230 and 250 miles up, because that's the only inhabitable part of space. And if you haven't seen my Van Allen belt video, it's because the Van Allen belts only hold 1%. Outside of the 1%, on the outside of the bow shock, there's 100% of that mass and energy that is filtered out by the bow shock of the magnetosphere. The Van Allen belts never get it. So anyone who says, oh, the Van Allen belts, their 1957 studies mean nothing in 2019. As we're coming up on 2024, when we have to have our own systems again, because we're not working with Russia and China and all the major national companies that are running space right now, we're not going to be able to buy our way in. So we have to be able to do it ourselves. We're not going to be able to be in that habitable area that Russia is redoing theirs with China. China's fell down, ours fell down. That was in the lower thermosphere, about 200 miles on down. that falls down, orbital decay, and you can fall up like the Hubble, the Spitzer, the Kepler. All of what we're planning the James Webbs to do is to fall up. So if we put something up there, we have to be able to create ionic drives or electromagnetic fields to push away some of the extra radiation that at 230 miles isn't there. So at 230 miles, you're getting 200,000 millisieverts a year of radiation inside of the capsule because of the transitional metals and passive shielding. You're only getting 10,000 of the sieverts that, the 100,000 of the millisieverts that you're encountering throughout that year. You can survive that. However, if you go up to 1,000 miles up, where we're hoping that this next space station we're going to make is going to be at, why Jim Bridenstine and Mike Pence last week went to Russia to talk to them about the nuclear isotope they were creating on their liquid-propelled rockets to make it possible for them to create active shielding on the crafts if they start to go up higher. And so while all of these crafts are being made in the thermosphere with hopes that we'll be able to push up higher, we have to come up with ways to do so by 2024 so that we can do the same science we're doing now for the same cost we're doing now, or even cheaper, because if we're not paying Russia for the shuttle rides up and we're not having to pay for all of the maintenance of the shuttles as well as the occupying the actual stations, we only get 2 seats out of the 6 available, sometimes more. So bottom line, Russia always has owned 3 seats, which again shows that Russia owns the International Space Station, considering they get at least half of the seats and 3 of the other half is rented out. We usually get 2. And so obviously this next one, like the Apollo 17, is going to be a thermosphere-driven station. It is going to have to be a little bit higher or a little bit lower. Most likely, since we failed twice, and China failed as well at making one under theirs, we're going to try and put it above theirs, which is a more radiant environment. Which is why everybody, like ICON, that was just launched to about 450 miles up, where we'd like to put the next International Space Station, why yesterday from Cygnus it was launched and is now up in the thermosphere trying to get readings as to what the environment is actually like. Because the highest the shuttle ever went was 358 miles. And it failed because neurological issues, because of the radiant environment that was making it through the hold of the ship, because transitional and passive metals, those materials only work within the environment the space station's at. Any higher up, Marco Durante has shown, it passes right through these transitional metals. You need electromagnetic shielding outside of or a part of the transitional metals to keep those free energy and free radicals and that extra energy from penetrating the hole and then you. So this is very clearly him stating that we want to do these missions, we need to do these missions, it'll make everything cheaper. We can't just keep sending up satellites because remember the Russian nesting dolls? Clearly, Russia is knocking out all of their equipment, so they can't just have smaller satellites within the mesosphere like we used to, because it's become a war zone and Russia's sending out little things to knock our things out of the sky because it's military dominance. That's what the space race is about. Always has been, always will be. They're winning. Them and China. Treaties signed, acts in motion. Our desperation is being shown right here. So, this is him explaining very clearly that the Gateway is nothing more than another a thermosphere transit station that we're hoping won't fall up or down, and we're hoping we will recapture the last Apollo mission, because the last Apollo mission only went 230 miles up and met with the Soyuz, where they put their space station, and then we begged for them to make the next one international. And the next one now will not be international. It will be a communist station. It's going to be owned by Russia and China, and they will lease out to who they lease out to, but it's looking like we're not going to be a part of that lease. So, the end. That's what it all boils down to.